warnings.
Great, Abraham, that's your cue.
All right. Welcome, committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the LSTFC CareCorp Grants Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raise hand feature. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference, and to please be aware of your surroundings behind you. All LSTFC and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select enable auto transcription.
Thank you. So what do we want? We want to take roll?
Yes. Thank you, Eric. Commissioner Blakemore.
Here.
Commissioner Campbell.
Here.
Commissioner Escobedo is not here. Judge Klein. Absent. And Commissioner Iskin.
Here.
Eric, we do have quorum, and then I'll do roll for liaisons and staff. Selena Copeland from LAC. Lauren Klein from LAC. Laura Brown from the Judicial Council.
Here.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Melanie Snyder from the Judicial Council. Oh, I think you
Here.
just popped up. Okay, hi, Melanie.
I have good timing.
Good afternoon. And then for State Bar staff, Dwan Nguyen. Hi, Dwan. I see you. Rocio Avalos.
Here.
Hi, Rocio. Chris McConkey is me. Brady Dewar. I actually see we have Raul Duran. Hi, Raul. Shannon Crossley. And then Abraham Gutierrez. Great. Hi, Abraham. And that's it for liaisons and staff. So the next would be public comment, Eric.
Okay, great. Yeah. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment?
There are no hands raised.
Okay. All right. Let's move on then. Chris, I actually don't have the agenda in front of me. Do we have any action items for or minutes of prior meetings that we need to approve?
We do. So we have the open session minutes from August 23rd, 2023.
All right.
Up for approval.
Okay. Any comment on
the motion to approve?
second?
Thank you, Commissioner Blakemore moving, Commissioner Iskin seconding, and I'll take the vote. Blakemore?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Escobedo is absent. Judge Klein, he is still absent. And Iskin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, great. So Chris, again, I apologize. I'm just running in from another meeting. I assume we only have one major item on the agenda here. Is that right?
We do.
Okay, why don't we move to that? Can you or somebody summarize where we are on that one and what we need to approve or
Yeah,
talk?
so I'm going to take a moment just to share my screen. 1 second. I also had to start the slideshow, so that's why that took a little longer. Okay. So can you see my slides now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So the one item, other than approving the minutes on the agenda for today's committee meeting, is to recommend additional 2023-2024 CareCorp awards to the Full Legal Services Trust Fund Commission. This presentation is similar in many respects to a presentation that State Bar staff delivered to the committee on August 1st. So I will kind of touch on the most important pieces, but I might sort of go a little more quickly through material the committee has heard before, but I'm still going to present a little bit for the public record on statutory background for this recommendation, the scoring rubric that was applied, the one award recommendation that the scoring team is bringing to the committee today, and then what this one recommendation would mean for the reallocation of leftover funding for representation of care court respondents this state fiscal year, and then there's a proposed resolution. So just sort of for the record, and to refresh your memories briefly, the CARE Act, the Community Assistance Recovery and Empowerment Act, is creating a new court program. That program does launch on October 1st, but a few days from now, for 7 counties in California: Glen Orange, Riverside, San Diego, San Francisco, Stanislaus, and Tuolumne. It launches on December 1st for Los Angeles County, and the remaining counties in California will be launching care courts by December 1st of 2024. As a reminder, care courts must appoint, pursuant to the CARE Act, qualified legal services projects to represent those who are the subject of care court petitions, respondents, and if a QLSP is unavailable to do so, a public defender's office. The commission, the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission, may fund QLSPs to represent respondents. Any funding left over from awards to QLSPs goes to public defender's offices for respondent representation, and the commission may fund support centers and now other entities to provide training, support, and coordination to implement the act. Pardon. If no QLSP has agreed to respondents, care courts will appoint a public defender. So there's an update on this slide. So the Budget Act of 2023, which passed at the end of June, these dollar amounts have stayed the same, provides at least $20,400,000. I'll explain how it could be more for QLSPs and public defenders to represent respondents, up to $1,020,000 for legal training and technical support to implement the act, and that can go to support centers or other entities that qualify, and then $1,432,000 to administer the funds, including collect data from QLSPs, public defenders, support centers, and other entities. The update here is that on September 13th, just a couple of weeks ago, Senate Bill 104 became law, and it authorizes care court grants from the commission to support centers or other entities that have expertise in providing legal training and technical assistance to legal aid providers or public defenders. Previously, this funding for legal training and technical assistance was limited to qualified support centers. As a reminder, no support centers applied for a 23-24 care court grant. And since this change in the law, one agency, a government agency, has applied for funding to provide legal training and technical assistance to QLSPs and public defenders, and they've applied as an other entity. Given that this change in the law became effective only a couple of weeks ago, given that care court launches on October 1st for 7 of the 8 counties, given that the Budget Act uses language about October 1st to sort of initiate support center and other entity services, OA and I and the Care Court Grants Committee scoring team moved very quickly to field an application from this other entity applicant to review it, to score it, and bring a scoring recommendation to the committee for consideration today. Because of the timeline and for consistency in grant making, the Office of Access and Inclusion used the same request for proposals, which the committee had previously approved back in June. For this, there was too little time to ask the committee to adopt a new request for proposals for just other entity applicants, since they were essentially applying to perform the same statutory role as support centers. The RFP, while not mentioning other entities explicitly, was applicable to other entity applicants. So the same RFP was provided to this other entity applicant. That RFP sets that a successful proposal will describe the applicants, whether a sports center, another entity, or QLSPs' qualifications and organizational capacity to perform this role under the CARE Act. That can include their experience. For the QLSPs and public defenders, it would probably be actually providing these services. For support centers and other entities, it would be serving QLSPs and public defenders in providing these services. But those are serving adults who are experiencing a severe mental illness as defined by the CARE Act, representing clients in mental health cases such as LPS conservatorships or assisted outpatient treatment matters, helping them to access the types of services and supports that the CARE Act seeks to provide to care court respondents, and then more generally, experience litigating and negotiating, which is the interventions the CARE Act contemplates for QLSPs and public defenders. So for an other entity applicant, it would be their ability to provide technical assistance and legal training to QLSPs and public defenders to do this work. The scoring rubric was the same. I won't read the whole thing. I'll just remind everyone it had 4 categories: project impact and strategies, overall qualifications, administration, of the kind of ability to administer this grant, and a plan to evaluate the services that they were providing. I will pause for just a second to see if I don't see anyone hasn't raised their hand yet. I'm about to move into like the substance of the award recommendation, but does anybody have any questions about SB 104 or the CARE Act or anything? Okay. So qualified legal services projects and support centers had to apply by July 17th, 2023. This was the original deadline for those applicants. This was before Senate Bill 104 became law many months before. The commission indeed approved 2 grants to 2 qualified legal services projects at its meeting on August 10th, 2023. As a reminder, no support centers applied. SB 104 expanded the eligibility for this legal training technical assistance funding on September 13th. One other entity has applied. Since the commission had authorized a commissioner staff team to score all of these applications in consultation with the committee, Office of Access and Inclusion convened a similar scoring team to last time. Last time it was 2 commissioners and served on the scoring team, and 1 served in a backup role. We went back to those same 3 committee members to score this, and again had a 2 commissioner scoring team and 2 OANI staff members. And that team followed the same approach to scoring as last time, and that was to arrive at a rounded average score for each row of the rubric, and then to set a minimum score for it to recommend funding. So for consistency's sake, we did that again. The same funding, the same minimum score was applied, and that was 56 points out of 80, which is 70% of the points available in the rubric. Before I present the score and the funding recommendation, I'll flag that the scoring team took note that CARE Court will serve adults experiencing a severe mental illness. Many, if not most, of those respondents will be homeless and at risk of homelessness. That was relevant to the scoring team's analyses of the strength of this particular proposal. So it focused on whether or not this other entity applicant demonstrated in its application materials an ability to support QLSPs and public defenders in serving this particular population. For instance, it discussed its readiness to prepare QLSPs and public defenders to serve people who have severe mental health issues, to support them in implementing care plans and agreements, as well as to advocate in court in CARE Act proceedings. Its plan and readiness to evaluate its services to QLSPs and public defenders to allow for mid-grant year pivots, and to provide substantive expertise so that QLSPs and public defenders can do the best job possible. The proposal scored, which is from the Indigent Defense Improvement Division of the State of California's Office of the State Public Defender. It scored 62 points, which is above the minimum the scoring team set for itself to recommend funding. So it is being recommended for funding. It's being recommended at the full amount that the applicant is requesting, and that's $254,850. So a reminder, there was $1,020,000 available for this work this state fiscal year. So this is just over approximately a quarter of that. So, and I realize I'm going kind of quickly because some of this is familiar, but if anyone has any questions, kind of any questions about, I'll just pause for a second. Like on the nature of this proposal, they do have a really nice detailed profile sheet and the materials that we posted for today's meeting. Maybe before I talk about reallocation, I don't know if Commissioner Blakemore or Iskin wanted to say anything at this moment, since they served as, they also read the application. or if we're good. Great. All right. So the Budget Act of 2023 as amended, it actually provided for this in the original version, but SB 104 kept this, provides that any funding that remains from the $1,020,000 that is for support centers and now other entities to provide legal training, technical assistance, anything left over needs to go to the counties for representing care court respondents. That would be the work that QLSPs and public defenders are performing. If the committee agrees with the scoring team and recommends to the full commission an award of, just go back, $254,850, that would leave $765,150 left over. So that would need to be reallocated for respondent representation. And that would be going for this year to the public defender's offices, since the sequence of events resulted in the QLSPs submitting and having approved a particular grant award amount. Their amount will stay the same. So this would go to the public defenders in each county via the original allocation formula. Same formula that was used to set the county level funding with the $20,400,000 that was the minimum for respondent representation. So what this table is communicating is just if the committee makes this recommendation, because it agrees with the scoring team, and if the full commission approves an award of this amount, here's how that $765,150 will be spread across the remaining counties.
So
one
Chris,
thing, oh yeah,
if I could just really say the same thing, but a slightly different way. If we decide not to make this award, or before this entity filed its application, submitted its application, we had been planning to distribute the entirety of the, what was it,
20,000, yeah.
20,000, among these counties. So the effect of approving this award is that we'll basically be taking $254,000 of that money away from that across the board allocation and allocating it to this particular support center to do what they propose to do.
That's correct. And this is something that came up in this next point is something that came up in the commission meeting on August 10th. Someone asked, I think maybe Eric, you asked about this. The funding for Glenn County and Tuolumne County will actually stay the same because the allocation formula sets a funding floor for all counties of $60,000. And they were under that funding floor before, so they were raised up to 60,000, and they would still be under the funding floor even after we reallocate the $765,150. So they would still, even after reallocating this, be under the floor and come up to 60,000. So their amounts would stay the same. Everyone else would get a little bit more. Since Los Angeles, the formula looks at, it takes into account a funding floor, it takes into account a cost of providing counsel data, but it mostly looks at each county's share of the 8-county cohort's general population. LA has about half of that for this state fiscal year for these 8 counties, so about half of this amount would be going to Los Angeles County, and the other, besides Glenn and Tuolumne, the remaining counties would split the other half.
This is Cliff Klein. Can anyone hear me?
Oh, hi, Judge Klein. Yes.
I've been listening. I showed up. There's no one here at the LA bar. They won't let me up into any meetings. So I'm on my iPhone.
I apologize. This meeting was remote only, and
well, I know I've always showed up remote. It's always been remote for me. All right. Anyhow, yeah, because I can't do it from my home or my office with a public thing. All right, enough of my complaining. I'm here. I'm listening. I finally got through.
Good. I'm so glad you're here. I'll make sure we've noted that you're here for the roll.
Yeah, it seemed to me that I guess it's coming out of the LA. Is it coming out of the LA Public Defender's budget, the allocation, or what? To respond to Mr. Iskin's point,
It's really coming out of the across the board allocations to the
okay.
254,000 that would have been spread over 7 counties, and we're proposing to allocate it to this group within the state public defender's office to do some training. Right? And Chris is going to get into what they're going to do.
Yeah, all right. No, I read it. It seemed to me it was one of the more impressive applications the type of training they're talking about, they're probably very well suited. All right, and I thought, frankly, the public defender's estimates were a little high, having worked in those courts as to the amount of time it would take for these, but I'm jumping ahead. All right.
Okay, so the next slide was actually the proposed resolution. Because we put the profile sheet with the posted meeting materials that explains their project abstract. I was taking for granted that the committee members will have read that and kind of a sense of what the project is proposing. But if it's helpful, I'm also happy to, since you brought it up, Eric, just describe at a very high level, like what's in there, especially if it refreshes your memories. So essentially please do defer to the posted materials that you read, but the Office of the State Public Defender, Indigent Defense Improvement Division is proposing suite of legal training and technical assistance, including live in-person trainings. I believe it's at least 2 that will bring in experts on advocating for clients that have severe mental health issues. It's going to include a suite of online trainings, sort of like with its own curriculum. And then that will be something that can exist for when CareCourt rolls out in all 58 counties next year. We want to make sure that we're not just doing live one-time touch points, but that there's something that can carry forward. And then they will also be creating substantial written materials and resources and guides, including sample motions and other sort of materials that can help with the advocacy in court. I think those are like their 3 big pillars of their proposal. And that too will obviously be available in, the idea is that will be available in future years. So they're creating, using this year to create a body of technical assistance that will be available going forward. So the next slide is the proposed resolution. But if there are other questions about the proposal, about SB 104, the reallocation or anything, now would be the time. Okay. So the proposal in staff's memo is, it reads, resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission, CareCourt Grants Committee, acting on behalf of the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission under its delegated authority, recommends the 2023-2024 CareCourt grant recipient and amount as described in State Bar staff's memo dated September 28th, 2023.
Catherine will move the proposed resolution.
Second.
Thank you. I'm just going to apologies if you see my spreadsheet, moving it to a different screen. Okay, so Commissioner Blakemore moves and Judge Klein seconds. I'll take the vote. Blakemore,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Escobedo is still absent. Judge Klein
Yes.
and Iskin.
Yes.
Motion carries. And that was the only other item of business for this meeting. I'll just flag that this was a recommendation to the full commission, and the full commission where staff is endeavoring to convene as soon as it can, when as appropriate. So the full commission can consider this recommendation. It's likely that the full commission will meet just to pass a vote on this so that this work can get started as soon as possible.
Do we have a date for the commission meeting yet?
I think it's
most
still to
likely
be
October
determined.
13th, but we actually still don't have quite quorum, so we're following up with the commissioners that haven't voted.
Okay,
But that's the date that's leading right now from the doodle pool.
great.
Was there anything, Dwan or Rasil, you wanted to add? I wanted to make sure if before we ended, you had that opportunity.
No, just thank you everyone for coming together so quickly to consider and score and recommend this proposal.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all so much. And that's it, Eric.
Okay, I think we're done. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.